what are some of your other memorable moments working with Jason Calacanis at This Week in Startups?
Yeah. So Jason and Molly Wood was my other boss there, and she was just as involved as Jason was, like in the day-to-day process. But under both of them, they have so many years. They might be like some of the people that have been within like the radio and podcasting space the longest that are still extremely active.
Hey, welcome back to Seed to Harvest, a podcast with founders, creators, and investors about their stories, frameworks, and tactics. Really excited to have my friend Rachel Braun on today. Rachel, can you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Of course. So my name is Rachel Braun, like Paige said. Paige and I have known each other, it's almost been like a year now, which is insane. And I am a producer and researcher. And formerly, I met Paige when I was a producer working at This Week in Startups.
Yeah. Okay, well, I want to kick things off. What initially sparked your interest in media and tech as it stands today?
Yeah, of course. So initially in college, I had studied this major called IST, which is Information Systems and Technology, Information Sciences and Technology, actually. And a lot of my friends in the program really wanted to be computer scientists. And I was like, I love tech, but I really don't know if I want to go down the comp sci path. I don't know if I really want to be a software engineer. So I think just having to dive in online, especially during those college years, and figure out what else there is in the tech community that isn't software engineering was a great introduction. Honestly, before that, even going into college, like Cyber Chase was my favorite show when I was a kid. So
such a good
I feel
show.
It's like a foundation, right? It's like the foundation of my youth.
Did we graduate around the same time? When did you graduate from college?
I graduated from Penn State in 2020.
Okay, sweet. Same year. COVID grads. Did you guys graduate on like Zoom or Facebook Live? What was your...
We did. Oh, we did Zoom, and I think like one of the Jonas Brothers was on our Zoom though. So that was cool. Like Joe Jonas. Yeah. So it was over Zoom, but it could have been worse.
We were Facebook Live. We did not have one of the Jonas Brothers, but it was pretty cool from what I remember. So weird times. Okay, so let's talk about being extremely online. I think there's like a really interesting thing that happened, like specifically with like our grade and a couple years after, where our like period of creating friends was really forced to be online due to the pandemic. So I'd love to hear more about like what's your experience been being extremely online, active on Twitter in those circles. Any like fun stories that you want to share?
I mean, I'm sure there's like a ton of fun stories. I feel like now when honestly before the pandemic, I wasn't super on Twitter. I wasn't really on Twitter until 2021, so a year after college. I mean, I had an account, but I wasn't really tweeting actively as much. And then 2021, I started tweeting more and making those like online friends because I worked remote and I was living with my parents in a suburb of Baltimore. And I was like, okay, there aren't as many people in tech right now living in Baltimore that at least I have access to. So where are they hiding, basically? And that's kind of why I started going like to Twitter more and like interacting with people and being like, hey, like, what are you guys up to? Like, what do you do for work? Like, where are you located? Like, I really want to meet friends in my industry. I worked at such a small company, and being fully remote, I was really missing that human connection. But even before that, I was an Army brat growing up, like right before we pressed record on this. I told you I went to like, for high school, I had 4 schools in 4 years, like 3 high schools and a community college. So I feel like having online friendships was something that I was like relatively comfortable with, like moving around a lot. I feel like Facebook Messenger was like a lifeline a little bit.
I love that. I feel like it's like a very specific skill to build friendships online as well. I'm curious, like on that note, what was your first tweet that went like semi-viral? Do you remember it?
I think it was one about creating connections. I think it had something to say. It was something to like the tune of a lot of young people are really good at... Oh, are you okay?
Yeah, I was gonna see if I could find it.
I think it's something like young people are really good at creating connections, but not really good at like cultivating friendships or something along those lines. And that was definitely something I was feeling at the time. It was probably around that 2021 like time period.
Yeah.
Where a lot of the peers that I have met online were professional, and I was realizing like, oh, like things don't really go any deeper than like maybe like a shared article or something like that. Like I felt like connections could only go so far on the internet, which might be like kind of not very like Gen Z of me to say, but I don't think I've even now have been able to make like a true 100% genuine friendship with somebody until I meet them in person.
That's super interesting. I feel like I made actually I'm doing like a retreat this weekend with this group chat that I met over Twitter. We like jokingly call ourselves the Sim Squad, but it's like Gabby Goldberg, Gabina, and Shreya, and we all met through like various like Clubhouse or Twitter, and then we've just had an active group chat for the past 3 years. So we've done this our
I love
second
that.
like retreat that we've done, but I feel like before that I hadn't really created any super crazy friendships. I mean, I feel like there's homies that I made. I used to play like a lot of Adventure Quest. I don't know if you ever played that, but that was pretty awesome. I was deep
I
on
used to do
those.
like RuneScape.
Yeah.
RuneScape was my game, you know? But even then, like, it felt like things could only go so deep. I guess I've made a lot of friends online, but it takes like me to meeting them. And like, I've met them in person. Like, I brought those friends like IRL, like
Yeah.
Emma, who you previously had on the podcast, like yourself. Like, we've met in person before. And I just think like having that moves the dial from like a connection to like
The friendship,
more so
yeah.
a friendship.
Okay, let's talk about so I attended the All In Summit. I got a ticket after I came to speak on This Week in Startups, and that's where I met you. That's where I met Landon, who was on the podcast in my first season. And we were joking that we were all at the kids' table because I think we were like a bunch of the people that were like under 25 there. What are some of your most memorable moments from that summit? And then I'll ask you like more broadly about working with Jason Calacanis as
Ooh,
well.
that is a great question. I think first off, there was like so many people that helped launch the summit. That was super really fun for me to meet people IRL, like I said before. Like I was on a completely remote team. So before even the summit happened, I would go down with a coworker named Amber, who is just such a superstar. And we looked at a bunch of venues and stuff like that. And really just the experience of learning how an event to that scale really happens. And Jason always calls it, I believe he says like a Mon level service, right? So there are a bunch of hotels, and Amman is like a very, very fancy hotel for people that don't know, because I didn't know. And they do a bunch of stuff to like level up. So
Yeah.
I'm not sure if Amman did this, but an example he used is like one time he went into a hotel and like everybody already knew his name. That was like part of the staff. And then when he went to his hotel room, like the pillowcases were monogrammed, and like learning how to create an event that was just like the Amman level service. Like, how can we create this? Like, level it up was just insane. Like, not a lot of people, especially young people, get to learn, like, okay, these are like some things that we have to have at this event for this many people in this kind of venue. Like, it was awesome.
Yeah, it was super cool. I remember the first night was a Godfather's themed poker
Mhm.
night, and it was in this crazy Art Deco, kind of like a converted theater or something like that. It was like such a
Yeah, it
gorgeous.
was a converted bank. It was insane. My only
Oh,
problem, though, is I didn't think there was enough bathrooms, but it was cool. It was cool. I
the
think
things you
the
remember
coolest
as an event
experience.
producer.
I know. I was like, I was just dang it. Like, so the bank was awesome, but and the venue was beautiful, and like everybody just did such a good job. But if I could change anything, it echoed a lot
Oh,
there.
yeah.
And I think like gauging a room, being able to turn down music and stuff like that, especially at an event that's like so geared toward like networking and meeting others,
Yeah.
would have been really helpful. And then also like just increasing the bathrooms. Like, maybe that's a girl problem. Like, the line's always
No,
long,
the
but like,
bathroom
come on.
ratio
Like, ugh,
important. I remember they did like the bars at
yeah.
the like old teller stations though, which was really cool. You like go up
Yeah.
like you're going to the bank teller. Yeah, that was really cool. It was so fun to meet you in person at that event. I think like what are some of your other memorable moments working with Jason Calacanis at This Week in Startups?
Yeah. So Jason and Molly Wood was my other boss there, and she was just as involved as Jason was, like in the day-to-day process. But under both of them, they have so many years. They might be like some of the people that have been within like the radio and podcasting space the longest that are still extremely active. So just being able to learn under people that are so legacy within this niche of media was really cool. Before coming on to This Week in Startups, I had my own podcast, and I remember like I was talking to Jason, being like, hey, what did you think of like my podcast? I don't even know if I mentioned it actually. I think he said he listened to it like before I joined the team.
Yeah.
And I think he said it was like a 7 out of 10 or something. And I remember being like, oh man, I'm getting a 10 out of 10. And somebody just told me on a previous episode that he ranked me like an 11 out of 10. It took like 2 years, but we got there.
I love that. Well, I feel like
But
it takes like a good amount of time to get more like comfortable with interviewing. Like, I don't know. So you ran a segment called Okay Boomer, which I adore. What did you focus on with Okay Boomer? Can you share?
yeah, so I'm mostly focused on. So actually, Paige, this is a fun fact. I actually wanted you to come on OK Boomer.
Yeah, I know. I'm sad.
But Jason had a segment, and I think it was on like first time investors.
Yeah, it was called
so
Angel.
like this investment cycle.
It's like emerging managers.
Angel was the segment.
Were you guys?
Yeah, emerging. There it is, emerging fund managers. And I was like, dang it, like Paige would just
I could do both.
Really freaking good. Yeah, I was like, she would just be so freaking good for this segment. So I had to like forfeit you for that segment instead, which you absolutely killed it on. But OK Boomer was interviewing people that were creatives and founders and investors, similar to this whole podcast, but focusing on people that were young or early on in their career, or people that have maybe founded companies that impact people that are really young in their career, and kind of just hearing about their experiences and things that they found to be difficult and any advice they'd have like along the way.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so cool. I'm curious, like, okay, so I just recorded an episode about cold outreach, and I feel like it's been received really well. Have you used cold outreach to get anywhere interesting in your career?
Totally. Everywhere. Like everything I do is like anytime there was somebody that we wanted to have on the show, it was like between me and sliding into their DMs or, figuring out like which platform like I could actually reach them on. I feel like I would be very, very much in a different place in my career if it wasn't for cold outreach. The coolest story I have is, I always tell people this, so I probably sound like a broken record, but the founder of House, which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore, but her name was Helena Price Hembrecht, and it was like my favorite I think it's low alcohol aperitifs.
Yeah, I have some bottles in the
office. Alcohol.
It's amazing.
They're so cute.
Yeah.
They're so cute. If you want to make like a little, it was the pandemic like mixy for me. Loved having them because they were low alcohol. I didn't get migraines after. Like, I'm not a crazy big drinker, so House was just awesome. And they make a really cool tote bag that has like pockets on the inside for bottles, which I loved. But I remember she was like blowing up over the pandemic, right? And I reached out to her and I was like, hey, can you come on like my podcast? And this was before I joined the Speak in Startups. And she like actually responded. And I was like, oh my gosh, like this is insane. Because at the time that was like the biggest person that's ever responded to me.
Yeah.
And she said, hey, listen, I'm actually so busy right now, but if you reach out to my assistant, like I would love to talk some other time, but just like this season of life is insane. And like a year later, I reached out to her assistant and I was like, hey, I'm actually like the producer on This Week in Startups. I know she's crazy busy, but if she has any time, like this would be so sick if she could like come on. Like this would be awesome. And she was able to come on. And just how kind she was to me, I think, like in the initial conversation made it like so exciting for me to reach out to her the second time. But when I reached out to her the first time, it was actually a challenge that I had where I reached out to one person every day for 100 days. And I think I tracked it on Twitter somewhere.
Wait,
but I did cold outreach for 100 days.
I didn't know you did that.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What are some of the people that you like reached out to?
It was good. Oh my gosh. I reached out to Toby, which is the guy who hosts the Morning Brew podcast. Over there, he was one of the people. Kat Cole, I reached out to, and she came on my podcast just before she even did Athletic Greens.
Yeah.
So that was like
I
sick.
Like the same time because she was on my season 1, and then she like came out right after, like the week after, or something.
I had her like, I remember my episode with her dropped a week after she announced that she was stepping down from her previous role as like president of the company that owned Cinnabon.
Yeah.
And I was like, yo, this is crazy.
What's happening next? I feel like her journey from like being the youngest VP at Hooters and doing their international expansion to working at like Cinnabon and then like moving to like the parent company, which is Focus Brands, and then her move to Athletic Greens was so interesting because she had worked at these like legacy brands and then like fully switched over to, like, athletic greens, which I think of as, like, such a different consumer base, but she's just, like, such a talented operator and, like, brand marketer,
Yeah.
so I think that's super
Powerhouse.
cool.
Yeah, if anybody, like, has the chance to check out her story, her formative years while she was in college and her experience, like, with Hooters, insane. Like,
Insane.
so cool to listen. She basically did everything at, like, one of the Hooters, and
She was really doing the
she's a beast.
most.
She was. She's a
Yeah,
beast. She's an absolute beast.
dang. Wait,
And
I
she got
love
married at Burning Man, which is really cool.
yeah,
So
she's so sick. Well, okay, wait, so I'm curious, like, with your cold outreach, I love that as a challenge. Were you just, like, looking to make new connections, or, like, what was your goal with the cold outreach, or what would you ask people when you reached out to them?
so I was a fellow, I think, at this time at Dynamo Venture Capital. At the time, I was like, maybe I'll do VC. I applied to grad school. I got into grad school and actually didn't go, but I didn't know right then what I was like going to do after the fellowship. If I was going to stay in investing, if I was going to join a startup, or if I was going to go to grad school for computer science. Like, I knew that I didn't really want to do it, but during the pandemic, I kind of felt like nobody knew what was happening. So I was like, I just need to keep reaching out to people, see what, like, kind of feel out what the landscape is. And I also think it's really important, even if you're a part of a remote team, if you're a remote worker, to cultivate some sort of network, because it's so much harder when you're not in an office. Like, I love working remote, don't get me wrong, but I have to work like 10 times harder, and you have to do stuff like without being asked in order to kind of show that you're like somebody at this in this landscape. Like, nobody, it's kind of like posting on social media. Nobody's going to know your Twitter account exists if you don't tweet. And the same thing goes with networking, especially professionally in tech. Nobody's going to know you exist unless you kind of like put more effort into that. And living somewhere that wasn't necessarily a tech hub, I had to work like a million times. It felt like harder than my friends that already were in SF. A great example of this, who absolutely kills it, is Turner Novak. Like, he doesn't live in a target tech city, but he's constantly putting himself out there to meet other people, to like show like, hey, this is like Banana Capital, this is what I do. And I have like so much respect for that.
Yeah, yeah, he's great. I met him, I think when we were just getting started on Twitter around the same time. So it's been super cool to see like that cohort of kind of like solo GPs who got their start really on Twitter take off. It's been super
Yeah.
cool. Oh, okay. I want to ask you, speaking of Twitter, you have been sharing some tweets recently about your thoughts on like AI and music. There's been that viral Drake song that's been going around. You were commenting on Grimes talking about using, like, being okay with using their likeness and creating AI music. Can you share a little bit on your thoughts on what's going to happen there? I feel like, I don't know, I like wanted to manage rappers when I was younger, so I feel like I learned a lot about like music copyright, and I feel like a lot of the people that are talking about it online don't have as deep context for it. So I'd be curious to like hear what your take on it is.
Yeah. So something that's super interesting is I don't know too much about copyright at all with music, but with like this AI landscape, it's getting so freaking interesting. So this is also according to The Verge, and I linked this article over on my Twitter. If anybody's like interested in reading more about it, I believe they broke down like the the issue where YouTube took down the AI generated song that like featured The Weeknd, and that was because the label that manages The Weeknd and a bunch of other people, I think it's called the Universal Music Group,
Mhm.
UMG, owned the Metro Booming tag. Like, that actually started in the beginning of that song. So YouTube didn't take it down because like the label owned the song, because the label didn't. They just took it down because the label owned that producer tag in the beginning. And so if that song gets re-uploaded without the producer tag, it's going to create a lot of like a lot of talk, I think, like in the copyright world, with considering like, if you take somebody's voice and you upload it, does that give like the label the right to take it down if they weren't the ones to necessarily like own the song initially? And I also think what Grimes is doing is going to be so cool, because I think there's like a really interesting path here for passive income, where if you are somebody that is a musician who doesn't necessarily want to make that their full-time career, maybe this is just something that you're doing for fun, I think it would be really cool. Maybe you're a singer, to like upload your voice, like a few songs of you singing, and say, hey, you can use my voice in everything as long as I get like a certain percentage in the song. So there's a website, I'm blanking on what it's called, but like creators right now and musicians can go and like use different like vocals basically and like short lyrics that people are singing and like use them in their songs. And I imagine like a platform like that existing for people with like their AI voices. And I'm sure something like this already exists, like speaking it out, but it's going to be interesting. And the question I have is like, will we still value AI generated music as much as we value not AI generated music? So say there's like a Taylor Swift song that comes out and it's like AI generated Taylor Swift, are we still going to value it as much? And if we don't, like our generation, are we going to sound like when I like show like my dad the music I'm listening to, he's like, there's no real instruments in it. Like, rah, rah, rah. Like this isn't real music. Like, are we going to sound like that?
Yeah.
Like, I don't know.
Yeah, it's interesting is like the generational shift is like, does the generation that comes after us, is that more accepting or less accepting of those changes that are happening? Because I feel like there's definitely, I don't know. I did get my parents into house music, and I know they're listening right now, but I got them into like a lot of house music. And I don't know, I think it's just a really interesting application, like AI in the creative spaces specifically is like that running dialogue of, does this impact people as much? Like, is this story enough? Is this art enough to be considered like with original content that's produced by an artist? I feel like one of the things that's cool about like original art is that it's imperfect. Because I feel like
Yeah.
AI generated creative things tend to be, well, I would say there's definitely some examples of things that are like that, but there's like less space for imperfections if you're looking at like a large language model or something like that writing a song. Like sometimes I think the beauty can come from those imperfections. Okay, let's talk about creator
totally
tools.
right.
So you've produced podcasts, you've had your own podcast. What are the creator tools? What does your stack look like today?
Ooh, for podcasting
Yeah.
or
Yeah, let's hear it.
that is a great question. So it totally depends. It totally depends on who I'm producing for because I think like everybody has like their own opinion on like what they like the best. So a bunch of people have sure microphones, for example. I use like a Samsung Q2U because it's light and like I can like toss this thing off my desk and it was like $60. So I think like the best thing to consider kind of like when you want to start a podcast or when you are podcasting is like yeah, you can have like the entire setup of somebody else, but like what really works for you in your space. Like there was times and you can even like see this in episodes where if Jason's traveling or if Molly was traveling, we would actually have them wear like these headsets that are kind of dorky
Yeah, you guys
looking,
sent me
but they're
one. I have
headsets.
one.
Yeah, with like a mic on like on the headset, right?
Yeah.
Like how somebody would at a call center. Because at the time, like that was the thing that worked the best in that moment. But I hate how much people think there's like this barrier to entry with a lot of creative mediums and a lot of creative outlets because 9 times out of 10, especially within podcasting, I know there's a way to make it work. Like
Yeah.
whatever your budget is, whatever your situation is, your living situation maybe, like there's a way to figure it out.
Yeah, I honestly love the ones. Well, I feel like the Gimlet Media startup podcast is like the OG. I think Adam Faze, who produced a bunch of like really interesting original podcasts, and now is it Mad Realities? He showed me it, and I was like, oh, this like blew my expectation away of like what a podcast could actually be, because it's like he's telling a story and then it cuts into voice memos, and you can, he's like on the street pitching a VC. And I feel like that was so cool. So I do think that like if you understand the context and you're not expecting perfection in like a perfectly quiet room or whatever, you can come up with some like really interesting creative stuff.
And it's also crazy because in the world of podcasting right now, like we are really like we're such newbies in this space. And right now, most podcasts that like I see people putting out are just audio. They're video as well, and there's like other components of it. And where are we going to draw this line between maybe having like a talk show or a YouTube channel versus like a podcast?
Oh,
like,
yeah.
podcasting is really blurring this line right now. And my favorite content to consume ever is like video essays. So it's like videos online talking about stuff that's like, I don't know. There's a great person that I like. Her name is Tiffany Ferg, and she has something called Internet Analysis. And video essays on like things like van life and is it like great or is this something that is actually just a miserable thing that people are putting up on the internet trying to glorify? And it's really interesting to hear other people's perspectives, and I can listen to them and, like,
I
go
love a
running and
good
do
social
you
commentary
know?
one. I like
Right?
Mona Lee
I
on
love those.
YouTube does some really interesting ones on,
Yes! Oh
like,
my gosh! She's had
core,
one about the
TikTok
90s.
trends, Y2K,
Yes.
hyper
Heroin
femininity.
Chic.
Yeah, she does some
She just had a really
really
good one on that.
interesting stuff. I like how she, like, dives or she
Yeah.
did a really cool one on cottagecore, but she basically, like, breaks down
Yes.
the historical elements of trends and then, like, their applications today, and her videos are, like, really well edited. She also has really great thumbnails. Yeah.
She does, and it's like, what's the difference between that? Because and a podcast, and I think what's crazy is that obviously takes a lot more effort than
Yeah.
something that I'd be doing for podcasting, but if you just strip her audio, one of the reasons why I think she's, like, a great creator is if you strip her audio down and you're just listening, you can tell exactly what's happening in the video, like, you're not so reliant on the video portion
Yeah.
of her content, and I think that is incredibly important for most creators. It's
It's like
like,
standalone
even with
audio
TikTok,
works.
like
Yeah.
yeah, like, you can't just focus on one of those factors, like, you really have to have something that is capturing all these senses because people's attention spans are so short, like, what you gotta make sure they're
Yeah.
engaged somehow,
I was laughing.
which
I was
sucks.
thinking about something my brother said. So we were doing this like so one of my brothers edits the podcast and the other one, Owen, was the one who illustrated my book. And we were talking about it and we're like, all right, Owen, like what do you want to see in the podcast? And we do like YouTube shorts. So we do like 8 videos weekly. It drives like 80% of our views on YouTube and probably like 50% of our new subscribers come from there. And he was like, oh yeah, you should try making like podcast videos plus ASMR, like, slime videos, because he said there's this trend on TikTok of people, like, having something that's very, like
Like, talking
yeah,
over.
audio. Well, just, like,
Yeah.
literally 2 videos. So it's, like, one is the podcast, and then one is, like, someone playing Subway Surfer or, like, an ASMR, like, cutting Play-Doh, and
Yeah.
I was like, "Oh my gosh, that's crazy." But he was like, "Yeah, it makes sense because, like, if you get bored watching the person, you can just watch the ASMR video, and you can, like, listen to it
And,
but
like
you're not,
yeah,
like, overstimulated, and I was like, "Oh my god, that's crazy." It's getting very meta out there, but I feel like it'll be
it
interesting to
is,
try.
but if you step back to, like, 6 months ago, we kind of see that with, like, Get Ready With Me tutorial with
Yeah.
Alex Earl, who's, like, a really popular YouTuber. So, yeah, you're watching her do her makeup, so you can, yeah, have the audio off, and this is something that you're extremely interested in, but at the same time, like, you really wanna be engaged with what she's
Yeah,
saying.
exactly. Well, it's almost like I watch videos and I think a good example of this, like, is Hitomi. I've been following her for, like, years now on YouTube, which is crazy, but she'll do, like, a getting ready video, and she'll just, like, do something really surprising, like, she had this oh my god, it was so insane. My brothers and I were talking about it, it's like confusion is really key to standing out online, and she brought in literally a vase. Like, it was like, 2 hand widths apart. She's like, "I got this vintage carafe on Etsy, and it's just really been helping me hit my water intake." And, like, there was so many other things going on in this video. It's not about the carafe at all. But all the
Yeah.
comments were like, "She's drinking out of a vase. Like, this is insane. Like, is she doing this on purpose? Like, what's going on?" Like, the element of confusion is so interesting. I'm curious to hear what you have to say about that because you've like also worked on like more highly produced podcasts where I feel like the goal is like really high quality, not necessarily like tips and tricks to go viral in that way. So I'm curious like where you land on that personally.
Yeah. I like, personally, I'm not a fan of, like, a million growth tactics
Yeah.
because I think sometimes and not that I don't like growth tactics to grow a podcast because I think they're important, but I think sometimes when people focus on them way too much, it does diminish their, like, want to create the best quality they possibly can. So if you're so focused on going viral, are you going to be saying or doing something within that content that doesn't necessarily reflect you or doesn't have to do with the
Yeah.
video? And kind of being able to have, like, okay, how can I convey the message I want to while still being able to grow is something that is like extremely important to balance. And like a good example that's not even in the podcasting space would be like It's called the Reduced Shakespeare Company, I think,
Whoa,
and
cool.
it's like, a comedy group where I think they actually do like Shakespeare comedy, like Hamlet and things like that, I believe.
Is it that guy
But
Octopus Lover or different? Have you seen his
that
TikToks?
is, I love him. I completely love him. And I think like that is also really, that's a good example too. Like, how can I get my message across while like incorporating something else, like in the Reduced Shakespeare Company or Octopus Lover, like Jake, I don't forget his last name, but Octopus Lover, his first name is
He's so
Jake.
funny.
And apparently he was at Sophia
Yeah, I know.
Richie's
I was
wedding,
gonna say he
which
was
is
like
crazy.
making TikToks with Sophia
Yeah.
Richie. I feel like I saw one TikTok
Yeah.
about her. Had never really like heard about her before, and then it was like my whole For You page. I was like,
Same.
dang,
And she's killing
she
it.
is
I'm like,
killing it.
okay, girl, pop up. Tell me everything. But like, yeah, they're great at creating content that, you know, gets to the point of a story and like really relays like the point they're trying to get across, but at the same time is using comedy to kind of like boost that like effort of
Yeah,
growth.
comedy. I feel like comedy is big, like making people laugh. Huge. Do you have a
Definitely.
go-to dad joke?
No, literally none. And my dad messages us every single day in our family group chat, like every single day without fail. Like, I'll read you today's. That's like how we start our morning. My parents message us at between 6 and
I,
6:30. Then my dad sends a dad joke, like we like
can you
clockwork.
please read
And I
me
think today's
today's?
was like, I'll bring it
That's
up right
so
now.
funny.
Oh, he said, "I hear money talks, mine just waves goodbye." Was today's dad joke. I thought it was pretty good. We said under, so he had out of the I think 6 people in the group chat, he only got 2
Oh
ha-has.
no.
So wasn't
Wasn't the
wasn't a
ratio he
great
was
wasn't a
looking
great
for.
one today.
That is tough.
Was it? Well, sometimes he gets booze,
Ooh.
so you know.
Yeah. Yeah. That's still a pretty good response.
Yeah,
Like
let me see this
it
one.
definitely could be negative. It's not
So he and my brothers are so strict, like they're so mean
strict.
to him about it. Like they're that's not even good.
Up your bar.
No, seriously, it's like so
Uh,
bad. I'm like looking through all of our texts right now, and they're just like, I just looked up in our search joke in our family like chat, and it's insane. Like just like scrolling through, but
Wait, that's
it's
so
one of those
fun.
things, and I'm so thankful to have like parents that text me.
I love that. I okay, wait, I have a question as we wrap up. Do you have any questions for me? I spent
Of course
yeah,
I do.
hit me.
So
Okay.
in a previous episode that I was listening
Okay.
to, you said one of your favorite questions was what, like, to ask other people is like, what books are they reading right now? Because it really provides like a look into that person's
Yeah.
life. In full transparency, I just read a book club, but I've read Shoe Dog for the first time. I don't know how
I
I've
still
gone this
haven't read
long without
it,
reading it.
so don't worry.
Yeah, I don't know why I took. I'm like, I feel like everyone. This isn't also a book club with tech people. This is like my friend from high school. Like, nobody's a founder in it, and they were like, "Have you read this? This seems like something you would like." I'm like, I haven't. But what have you been reading? Because you read more than any.
Yeah, I've been reading like a lot recently. I recently read Tomorrow, Tomorrow, and Tomorrow, which like emotionally
Oh my gosh,
destroyed me. I think
I can't do it.
it's this wonderful story about these two kids who meet in a hospital when they're young and their paths intertwining throughout life, and they co-found like a video game together. It goes really well, and it goes through this like, I don't know if there's any other way to describe it, but like kind of this like DNA helix form of like some of them having success and some of them not, and like them having like challenges and triumphs in their like personal and professional lives. And it was such a beautiful story of like the intimacy of platonic friendship, and the ending murked me. I had to go like sit in a dark room for a while after that and just sit with my feelings. But I loved it. And I think like I invest pretty heavily in gaming, like gaming infrastructure, and it was really cool to like see how like, because they wanted a higher level of creative, it pushed the level of like gaming infrastructure that they could build, and then like vice versa. Like once they had that level of gaming infrastructure, like all these incredible games started coming out. What else have I been reading? I went to the free pile at the farmer's market and I got a bunch of really old tattered books. I think I'm reading one. I don't know. I think it was on my desk. It's like The Magic of Thinking Big, and it's like a 90s like self-help book, but it's like I love the OG ones because every self-help book, like the things in there have been said before. So I feel like sometimes when you go back to the ones that are
Yeah.
written, I think like pre-technology specifically, I feel like the ones nowadays that reference a lot of like digital identity and stuff like that. And sometimes I'm like, okay, like I think about this too much. So I want to get back to like who I am in person, like kind of need to touch grass a
Yeah.
bit.
Yeah.
So I've been reading that. I think it's The Magic of Thinking Big. So I've really been enjoying those too.
I love that.
Yeah.
I love like books written by therapists. Like
Yeah.
The Defining Decade or Maybe You Should Talk to Someone. Those are two books both written by therapists. And obviously like there's things in there that I'm not like 100% agreeative to.
Yeah.
But like it is so nice hearing somebody whose basically entire profession is to be like, okay, this is who you are as like a person, like really nailing that into your head. This like they don't talk about like who you are as your online self feels like a very like good experience to have. And also if you like to cry to books, have you read Crying in H Mart?
Oh my God, so gorgeous. I really liked it. I didn't realize
Literally
that the author was also like the lead singer or basically like
Japanese
yeah,
breakfast,
Japanese
right?
breakfast. I was like halfway through the book and then she just mentioned Japanese breakfast and I was like, "Oh, what?" Like I listened to Japanese
Yeah.
breakfast and no one told me about this, but it was like a side project that she had created to deal with the grief that she was going through with her mother's illness and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is crazy. I feel like I have so much context for this band and this music." So which was sick. Ooh, Daisy Jones and the Six. That's my favorite book that I've read
Oh my gosh.
recently. I'm in my Stevie
I
Nicks
haven't even
era,
I
I have to
haven't
say.
dude, it is so have you read that is probably one of my favorite authors, you know what I
Taylor
mean? Like
Jenkins
that
Reid
woman
is
absolutely
amazing.
amazing.
She goes so deep.
7
Yeah, Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, Malibu Rising. She's written some of my favorite books. I think that her portrayal of specifically a woman experiencing levels of like fame and success and some of like the downsides of that, whether that's like maintaining like friendships or relationships in the public eye. I think it's something that increasingly more people are thinking about, even in like niche ways as people build like online followings. There's this really like weird perception thing that happens where you can have some parasocial relationships or you don't know if they're parasocial. You're like, it just can complicate things. So I feel like she writes really well about
Totally.
that and that's hitting because a lot of people are like, I think a lot more people are becoming known than were in the past. Like there used to just be like a tier of
Oh my
celebrities,
gosh,
but now
yes.
there's like, a bunch of people at the
Brooke Shield talks about
yeah,
that
super
in her book.
interesting.
And have you read Brooke Shield's book now?
No.
So Brooke Shields literally talks about this. She's like, yeah, there used to be like only a few people that were famous,
Yeah.
like, and they were mega, mega, mega stars. Everybody would know who they are, right? But now, like, ask your dad who Madison Beer is. There's like, I don't even know if anybody on this podcast would know who Madison
Yeah.
Beer is. I barely know who Madison Beer
barely
is.
do
She has like
either.
multi-millions of followers. I don't even know what she's famous for. She could a model, singer, I don't know. She's just an internet person, but she has like millions of followers,
Yeah.
right? And it is crazy. It is crazy, you know? But
Yeah.
if you listen to Davy Jones and the Six as an audiobook, a different person is reading off each person's voice. So I read it as a regular book, like initially, and then my mom told me, she was like, re-listen.
Yeah, it's such a
re-listen to
cool
this.
format.
Like, you gotta try.
The docu-series is the
I haven't
Amazon
watched it.
You're Gonna Die. It's so good.
Okay,
The costumes
I'm
are
so excited.
amazing. Elvis Presley's granddaughter plays Daisy Jones. She looks exactly like I would imagine Daisy Jones. And Sam Claflin plays, what's his name? Oh my gosh, I'm forgetting. Anyways, plays the guy. It's good stuff. Okay, well, I'm excited to read more books. I want to read Brooke Shields' book. Thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find you on the internet?
Yes, so first off, thank you so much for having me on. This was super cool. People can find me at _Rachel Braun on Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, wherever. And if you want to email me, I'm rachel@braunandbrains.com. But Braun is spelled like my last name, so BRAUN. Recently found out that was like a Survivor thing, like Braun and Brains. So SEO is not good. However, I thought it was a pretty
Still,
cool.
we persist.
Yeah, but we're working on it. Like one day I'll be bigger than Survivor.
I love that.
I'm waiting.
I love that. Well, thank you so much for coming on, and I hope everyone listening enjoyed this one. Special thank you to producer Riley Jennings and podcast editor Tate Doherty for your help on this episode. If you're listening and you'd like to connect with me, follow me on Twitter or LinkedIn, Paige Finn with 3 N's. Thanks again for listening. I really appreciate it. You can look out for new episodes every Monday at 5 p.m. PST. And if you'd like to learn more about the strategies and tactics of seasoned institutional investors and rising venture stars, check out our YouTube channel at Seed to Harvest. Also, my TikTok channel is Seed to Harvest, where I post a lot of behind the scenes. And if you like this episode, please rate and review this podcast wherever you get your podcasts, if that's on Apple or Spotify. Anyways, thank you so much for listening. I hope you have an awesome rest of your day.